Hello everyone. Today it's me and Sebastian here.
Hi everyone.
Sebastian, polyglot from Belgium, speaks a lot of languages, 6 or 7 or
Yeah,
how many?
about 6 languages, yes.
Most of them at a very high level, and Lucas, of course.
Hello YouTube.
And there is always a lot of discussion about what the most difficult language is. Today we have a few polyglots here, so we thought that would be a good idea to have a discussion about that. Some people say it's Russian, others say it's Japanese or Chinese, maybe it's another language. We're gonna start with Spanish, right? We always hear that people that are learning Spanish. They say that Spanish is a
Well, I
difficult
think that
language.
one thing we should mention is what is the most difficult language. I think it depends on your native language, right?
Yes.
So maybe we should agree that we are gonna use English as a reference, right? Okay, yeah. So learning Spanish can be difficult. I think many people argue that you have to learn feminine, masculine, the gender, el, la, and then you have a lot of conjugation, a lot of tenses. So yeah, Spanish can be a difficult language, no? What do you guys
Right,
think?
but I think that French, for example, is also has feminine,
French is
masculine. It has feminine, masculine, and conjugations. But on top of that, the pronunciation is very complicated. I don't know what you think, Jan, but
I mean the silent
like
sound?
yeah, the silent letters, for example, in French. Yeah, I think the pronunciation is tricky.
Okay. You have a lot of vocabulary in common with English, I think, just like Spanish.
When I of Italian, for example, they have this the plural form for masculine and feminine. It's always different, and I think that in all the other Romance languages, you basically have to add as. Of course, there are some exceptions, but I think that as a general rule, you just add as.
Yeah.
But in Italian, they have 2 plurals, so maybe Italian is more difficult than French.
Than French.
Yeah, but if we look at just like the plurals, so in languages, for example, in German, then you have that too. Like it's a little bit more complicated actually because you have a lot of regular plurals in German. So I think if you're going to say that Italian is complicated, I think German is even more complicated just because of that.
The pronunciation in German, I think, is also not very easy. You have the cases, of course. Words are pretty long, I think.
Yeah, well, if you want to bring cases into the table, then I will say that Russian is more difficult because they have not only 4 but 6 cases. Right?
Okay, and long words,
And long
perfective
words.
and imperfective.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay, so talking about do you think there's any Slavic language that's more difficult than Russian?
And Russian? Yeah, maybe Polish because Polish they have 7 cases.
Yeah.
The pronunciation is more difficult, and I think that the grammar in general is more difficult than Russian.
Okay, so we're talking from the perspective of English speaking
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time. Okay, well, which language do you think is more difficult than?
Well, all of these languages have something in common. They are Indo-European,
Yeah.
and they also use like very simple alphabet. I think like the Cyrillic alphabet, like the Latin alphabet. But like Chinese, this is way more complicated. I think, even though maybe you don't have cases.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We just had a very interesting discussion about which language should be more difficult, Russian or Chinese. Lucas speaks Russian very well. Sebastian speaks Chinese. What, do you think? I think you still have the impression that Chinese is more difficult than Russian.
I do, yeah. I think I do. Yeah.
Why do you think so?
Well, I think maybe Russian is more difficult when it comes to grammar, and then you have a lot of culture behind it. But when you learn Chinese, you need to basically relearn how to read, and it takes a lot of time. If you watch a movie, you want to watch the movie with subtitles. You have to watch the movie with like Chinese subtitles. It's very difficult to read, so this sets you back a lot.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time to get used to reading in Chinese.
I think also another thing about Chinese is that often it's very difficult to translate a sentence from English into Chinese. Like in order to speak Chinese well, you really need to develop this Chinese way of saying things.
Exactly.
I think that's a huge difficulty as well.
Okay. But what about Japanese? Because Japanese has difficult grammar and the characters, and it's a non-Indo-European language, so maybe Japanese
Yeah, that's
then
3
will
alphabets.
be, it has 3 alphabets, so maybe Japanese will be more difficult than Chinese and
I studied
Russian.
I studied Japanese for a few months. I've studied Japanese for a few months a few years ago, and I found that in the beginning, I think it's easier to get started with Japanese because the pronunciation is pretty easy. Vocabulary is the pronunciation is also, quite similar to Spanish. It's not so difficult, but then the structure, if you want to make long sentences, get more complicated because of the structure.
I think that's an argument that you can use for Finnish, for example. The pronunciation is very, very easy, and some people say that Japanese and Finnish are even related somehow. I don't know if it's true,
Yeah.
but
Because in Finnish you have what, 15 or 16 cases,
yeah, it depends on how you count. But yeah, at least 15 cases.
and you have something else. What you explained to me the other day, like what was it? The declination of what?
Yeah, and then you have infinitive. I think they have 5 different infinitive forms.
Yeah.
I can list a
Yeah,
bunch
well,
of
let's
reasons
not
why Finnish is
Mention all
different.
the reasons.
Yeah.
But then you have Hungarian, right, with 18. So, but then again, you're using a Latin script.
And you were mentioning like a minute ago the pronunciation, but if we were going to talk about pronunciation, of course, like in Asian languages, you can have some really complicated languages, like Vietnamese, for example. Then you have 6 tones in the standard language, but in the south of Vietnam, they speak only with 5 tones. So you need to.
Can you give an example of a weird tone or a weird syllable or a weird sound?
Yeah, well, in Vietnamese they have this ma like this in the north of Vietnam, and this is very strange for Indo-European speakers.
What about Arabic? I mean, we haven't
Yeah.
studied any Arabic, so I guess there's not much we can say about that. Or
Well, apparently they have an alphabet, right? So it's not like Chinese or Japanese that you really have to learn all these characters. So you learn. I don't know. I think the Arabic alphabet contains 28 letters. Yeah, I don't know. I have never studied Arabic.
Maybe it's the most difficult language because none of us can speak it, so none of us try to
If
learn
you
it.
speak Arabic and you think it's a difficult language or easy, then let us know in the comments below if you think it's easier or more difficult than the other language that we have mentioned. Maybe there are also some minor languages that are
haven't mentioned,
difficult
right? Yeah,
that we
like
haven't mentioned.
There's
Like,
languages in the Caucasus.
Yeah.
50, 60 different cases.
yeah. Do you know the name of that language?
Not really. I think that these languages are spoken close to the border with Georgia. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it's true. There is
And the
10.
thing-
Yeah, sorry.
And I think it was you that told us that there was like one Native American language in which they have and cases and sounds,
Yeah,
or and tones.
Navajo,
Sure,
right?
it's Navajo. Yeah, Navajo is like that. Yeah, exactly. You mentioned something very important. Like we always talk about very popular languages. Like a lot of people say, "Wow, like German is so difficult," but they never really mention like Polish or I don't know, like languages with a lot of cases, and then because they're not as popular. But yeah, you have to take into account that many of these languages are probably unknown. Like.
So the conclusion: what's the most difficult language? It depends a lot on what your native language is. The language you already speak. And I think also if you learn grammar easily or not. Like I always have a hard time learning grammar. I think both of you guys really like grammar. So maybe languages like Russian, Finnish are going to be easier for you. No?
I think it's just something you have to do, right? Like you have to study grammar.
Yeah.
I think in the end of the day, we can discuss what the most difficult language is for the whole day, but actually really doesn't really matter, right? Because you can argue that Vietnamese is really hard because of the tones. I can argue that Finnish is really hard because of the cases. But actually it doesn't really matter, right? I think that if you have the motivation to learn a language, you should just go for
If you
it.
have the motivation, just go for it. It doesn't really matter if it takes a year or 5 years to become fluent, as long as you enjoy the learning process, right?
Yeah, right.
So that was it for today, and see you next time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Salut.